Well, awesome. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to bet on yourself first. I know that you're going to get a lot of other great content about your work and your plans and strategies and all that, but Chris and I are going to talk about our own personal experiences. I'm going to talk from the perspective of, working in a big organization like Adobe, and he's going to talk about what it's like to be a solopreneur or build your own business and do it all with yourself. So, but we're going to go back and forth, keep it pretty crisp, but we're really going to just talk about those three bets. Like, what would be the top three things we would do for ourselves? So that's the context of this conversation. Chris, anything before we get started?
No, I'm just happy to be doing this with you, Adam. Good to see you again.
Ditto. It's always fun to do this with you. All right, well, let's get started. So I'll start with my first one. And when I was thinking about this, it was really around the idea of like, control what you can and ignore the things that you can't, right? And so what can I do, and this is like, has been my goal at any step in my career, whether it was working in agency or working in a big corporation. And it really is educate yourself first. If anyone has watched my Real Creative Leadership podcast, I say it all the time, but if you want to lead, you have to read. And so it really starts with reading. I found that that's been the biggest differentiator for me in getting confidence, in getting a better understanding of the lay of the land, a better understanding of how to speak the language of marketing, to speak the language of business. It really, truly is the one thing that you can do. And early on for me in my career, it was reading all the award annuals, right? It was like, how do I really understand and study every single ad that's been done out there so that I don't repeat it in my practice? But later on, it's become other things like books and podcasts and watching, taking master classes or going and actually, I went back and got my master's degree in marketing strategy recently, just for kicks and giggles, just so that I can better understand the world around me. And let me give you just a quick story as to why that's important. So early on, I had a creative director, and I noticed that, all the rest of us creatives, we were just reading, websites and books around creativity and all about that. And he was reading stuff on marketing. And, we had a certain client in like the financial sector or in the healthcare sector, and he was reading stuff about that. And I'm like, why are you doing that? That's what the marketers are supposed to be doing. But the reality is he became such an expert that he was sought after and people wanted him there. And he always had a nugget of wisdom that he would drop in some meeting. And I remember him telling me once, he was just like, Adam, it's if you don't keep up, you fall behind, right? Like that's the literal answer. And so for me, it's not really about the hustle. I know there's all this talk about hustle, and this is the opposite of like the quiet quitting thing, but it's really about, if you want to become expert, if you want to be seen as someone that's always being invited to the table, you have to know more. And the best thing that you can do right now, it doesn't matter what your job is, doesn't matter what your role, your position, anything, is read, and learn as much as you can. That's how you're going to grow.
I love that, Adam. And I can see that both of us have a collection of books around us. And books are a big part of our lives, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to dovetail right into that and talk about high-fi ROI. It's a term that my friend, former business partner, Jose Caballero, shared with me, high-fidelity return on investment. And I was at a speaking conference and Alex Hormozy, who's this phenomenal business person, sold his company for $100 million and he's barely 30 years old. He said the thing that we all should do once you cover your living expenses is to spend as much money as you humanly can on your own personal development. So in preparation for this conversation with you, Adam, I wanted to go back in time and look at my career as I was progressing by doing unskilled labor and how that transitioned in moving me up the pyramid and what I was able to do. So let's advance the next slide there. So in the very beginning of my career, my life, I did what most people do when you're 15, 16 years old. You don't have any skill sets. And so I'm earning minimum wage and hating life. I'm clocking in and I'm thinking to myself, there must be more to my life than this. And then later on, it turns out that somebody hired me to do inking over their illustrations. I was a production artist, and I then made almost 6 times as much per hour than I previously did, and I felt alive. So this was my first clue. If you're able to apply a skill set that differentiates you from everyone else, so you're applying a little bit of trade and craft, so that pushed me to enroll into a design school and then learn something. So I went to community college, I learned desktop publishing, and then I made a little bit more money, as you can see. I finished my degree, I'm a new graduate, I'm able to make even more money. but the transformation starts to increase. Let's move on to the next slide here. Sorry. And you can see here, let me pull this over. My apologies, everybody. I can't see that far away. And so once I started my business, now I'm working for myself, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. You can see that my effective hourly rate, EHR, is going up and up. And here's where the real transformation happens. Oh, I'm sorry. And as I gain in skill and my ability to speak to clients, as Adam had pointed out before about being able to speak the language of business and marketing, I started to increase my worth to the world. So here's the big shift and change that happened. I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and he was having the most explosive growth in his life. And he mentioned this concept of working with a business coach. And it was the first time I ever even heard of that word before, like a business coach, such things exist. And sooner than later, I hired my business coach, the same coach he was referring to. His name is Keir McLaren, recently passed away. But Keir taught me so much. I didn't think it was going to be a long engagement, but I wound up working with Keir for over 13 years, where we met every single week, once a week for an hour and a half. And where Adam went to get his master's degree, I got my master's degree with Keir McLaren on the street, applying this knowledge in real time. And this now increased my net worth and also my effectively hourly rate. So such that I even shocked myself that people are willing to pay me $1,500 an hour to consult and to advise them, which then leads me to this wonderful place where the sum totality of my design and business experience, I'm able to become a public speaker and to command as much as $30,000 to do a 1-hour presentation. That's it for me. Back to you, Adam.
Well, I think that's awesome. That's definitely kind of my progression wasn't as dramatic, by owning my own company, but I could certainly see, similar steps. By the more I learned, the more I became an expert, the more I was trusted and moved up, which leads me to my next point, my second bet, which is building partnerships. That's another thing that I think has been critical in my growth, which is the idea that you just can't make it alone. Every time I think that it's just I'm alone, I'm a powerhouse, I'm just going to make it in this world and screw everyone else, like it never works out. It's always a bad idea. The best plans are always when I've built up a good relationship with someone, whether that's a marketer, a fellow creative, or anyone else, even like you, Chris, like just making those relationships helps you see things in a new light, try things differently, do things in a new way. And it really, like, especially when you look at it from a larger company, when someone in leadership is looking down on the team and seeing who's going to be growing or who's going to get the next promotion, it's not 100% based on just what their skills are or successes they've had. They'll usually reach out to peers or other leaders or other people in the company and say, what do you think about so and so? How are they doing? Just to make sure that they're not just, because someone could easily just like kiss up to the one boss, and then you don't get the perspective from everyone else. And so finding that peer relationships or others to vouch for you in your career is a huge part of your growth. So you can't just decide you're just going to be a rock star and then run to the top. Like it will hinge on other people. And so making those good relationships, becoming an asset and building all that trust is super, super critical. And I would say, a good sign for you to know if you're doing it right is if those people are inviting you to meetings, inviting you to projects, inviting you to work out problems with them because they know you'll add value. They know they can trust you. And that's a good sign that you're building relationships. If you just say, oh, I know so-and-so and I talk to them, every Thursday, that's not a relationship. You have meetings with them. So you've got to build relationships where they totally understand you and trust you and really want you to work with them on stuff. That's the difference. So remember that key. If they invite you to things without you even asking, that's a good sign that you're in. But that's what I would say. No matter what you do in life, find those partnerships, even if it's not work related, with your spouse or with your friends or whatever that may be. Going it alone, I don't know. Maybe I know I'm an extrovert. I get it. It's suckalicious for me. I'd rather make sure that I'm with someone. But I think it's just as true in a career. You can't just go out all by yourself and change the world. You need to have a partner.
I love that. I'm going to play off that with my next big bet here, which is not only to have partnerships, but to have uncomfortable partnerships. So my story begins here in 2013. I run into an old friend of mine, Jose Caballero, fellow Art Center graduate. And he starts cooking up ideas with me and saying, Chris, we should start an education company together. Now, first of all, I have an allergic reaction to partnerships, and I want to steer clear from all these things. And he's the exact opposite of me. I'm quiet, introverted. I just work at my machine. I prefer not to hang around with people. And Jose is this super extrovert. You know, he goes out there and he talks to anybody. He can feel comfortable in a room full of strangers. He's like, let's go make videos together. And I didn't want to, but I agreed to. And the decision to make videos on YouTube was a pivotal point in my life and my career. So sometimes these partnerships don't feel right and they feel really uncomfortable at the beginning. I think in general, unless they're unethical people, this is a good sign that this is where you should go. And because real growth happens in those uncomfortable things. And I have to say, outside of my business mentor, my parents, Jose had a really big impact on my life and the way that I think. And I've even find today, years after our partnership had formed, that I'm still using ideas that I got from him and that he taught me when we worked together. So let's talk about like how this happened, right? So I want to talk to you about us starting this new company called The Future. And I think we have the next slide here, right? And then what this did for us. Now, we were running a successful design business, doing multi-million dollars of revenue a year. And here I am experimenting something with this friend of mine, barely making any kind of money at all. And I got a lot of heat. I got heat from my friends, from my family, from strangers and enemies alike, that what are you doing? You're losing focus on your primary source of revenue. But I knew there was something here despite not having the evidence to prove that it to be true. So we started a company. Back then it was called The School. Now it's called The Future. In 2014, we did a whopping $15,000 of revenue a year. That's not even enough for me to cover an intern's pay. But we stuck it out. And we keep trying to validate the business model. You can see here the progression is happening, that we're growing almost by 300% year over year. These are not big, exciting numbers, but if you can see where it's going to get to a really exciting place. So have these uncomfortable partnerships, learn what you need to learn from this person who's going to challenge every part of you, and you might start to realize some of the results. Now, it starts to get really interesting in 2018 when the numbers start getting big enough, or we start to think to ourselves, oh my gosh, this can be a real business and a real company, and we're making difficult decisions now, whether or not we want to continue working in the service space or if we want to become a content and education company. So check out what happens in 2019. We didn't quite triple our revenue, but we hit some new milestones and we knew now this is a real business. And now we're going to leave behind the service world. And if we just quickly go over to the next two slides, you'll see that it's growing and it's growing. We're not quite sure what the ceiling is for this type of company, but who knows? Who knows what lies in the future?
That was a good ending. It is the future. I'm in. Well, awesome. Okay, so now we're going to move from that, because I think, leading off of what you just said, it wasn't just about finding that partnership, but it was like doing something with it. And that's really what leads me to my final big bet is, all right, once you've educated yourself, you've got partnerships, you've got all these things in place, it really is about taking strategic action. And when I say strategic action, I mean, it's really just like taking action, but it's like being smart about it. I talked a little bit earlier about the quiet quitting movement, where people are like, oh, I don't want the hustle. I don't want all this stuff. I'm just going to do the minimum. But for me, like getting ahead, there was also an old boss of mine in agency. Like, again, the same thing. If you're not going up, you're going down. And so you've got to take action. You've got to do something. You can't just, not do anything, but you got to be smart about what you're doing. And for me, it was really more so less about building or making goals, but really about building a system. So I'll tell you a story of just one thing of how this worked out for me. So for years and years and years, I always wanted to write a book, right? And it's always the goal, and it was a goal every single year. And at the end of the year, I would have written like maybe 1,000 words, 5 chapters, whatever it is every year. It was just like a pitiful amount. And then I always felt bad about myself. I tried other things to motivate myself. I had, joined groups. I one time went into another designer's office, gave him $1,000 and said, hold on to this. And if I don't hit my goal by this time, you get to keep the $1,000, right? I did tricks like that. I even did consequences where if I didn't hit my goal, I had to do a consequence, which one of them was to join an adult male tap dancing class and do a performance, which of course I failed. And I went and asked the group if they'd allow me to join the women's tap group. And they said, we don't allow men. And I couldn't find a place to even get a tap lesson. So lesson learned. If you're into that, maybe there's a hope for me somewhere else. But anyhow, in the end, I ended up reading this article on entrepreneur.com, which is all about building systems instead of just, in order to take action. It's not just having hope and building goals. And so what I did is I formed a group, and the system was every Thursday, we're going to meet at this clubhouse for an hour, whether I write one word or I write for an hour. And then every quarter, we're going to have a retreat at a cabin for an overnighter and work and write all day Saturday. By the time we made that system, 3 months later, 3 of us in the group had finished writing a book. And it was really just that consistency and showing up no matter what happens. And so whether you do it or don't do it, the system's going to keep going and moving and moving and moving. So that's my advice to you, is like, figure out a system, figure out some action that you can take. If you're really interested in making a jump to be a creative director, what are you going to do? What are the things you're going to learn and relationships you're going to build? How are you going to get there? What are you going to make happen in order for it to work? So it's really, really thinking really, really carefully about that. What are your next steps? How are you going to be really smart about it? What do you want to do? And really figuring out a plan and putting it into action. And then making sure that plan isn't just like a one-time thing, but it continues to go for you and continues to grow. And so if I tie all this stuff together of betting, reading and learning and making the partnerships and then taking action, there's one cool thing that Chase Jarvis, another, guy out there who many of you know, he had this thing where it was like, go out and find 3 people, like Chris said, that are different, that are unique, that are special, that are uncomfortable. Go find 3 people and do something with them, take action with them, make something with them, propose something. And so that's what I would say today is like, read, invest in yourself, figure out the partnership of who you want to go after, and then take action. Be strategic about how you reach out to them, how you propose something to them, but just go do something crazy awesome with someone out there, and let's see if we can change the world. I think that's a good way to end.
Wonderful, Adam. I have to confess, when you said adult male, my mind went somewhere else. I was like, oh my God, that is a consequence. And I love that you have systems built in to make sure you're accountable, and that once you join this group, you're able to write and surprise yourself at how much you're able to produce. Okay, so I'm playing off this theme about strategic action. So this idea is leap before you look. Now, most people are really scared to take action because they're afraid of messing up, or that their haters or the naysayers in their life will point their fingers. See, I told you couldn't do that. What a dumb idea. And they'll laugh and they'll ridicule you. But my life has been driven by this thing where I don't know where I'm going. I'm going to close my eyes and take action, because I know that in action is where all the learning happens. Theory is good, learning is good, intention is good, but until you apply what it is that you think you've learned, you haven't really learned anything. And this is why there are people who are theorists, and then there's people that are actually in the field, in the grind, doing what they need to do, and nothing teaches you like failure and experience will do. So early on in my life and my career, I had a good full-time job working at an ad agency, right? And I had a steady paycheck. There was no risk. You show up, you do work. There was an expense account, and life was good. But my friend Noreen Morioka told me in an interview I did with her a couple of years ago that comfort is a slow death. And I was very, very comfortable. I wasn't being challenged enough. And even though I had this nice salary and everything was lined up, I knew there was more for me. And so this is the point in my life where I say, you know what? I'm working for people. Now I need to work for myself. As the expression goes, if you're not building your dream, you're building someone else's. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have a plan, didn't even have a professional portfolio, I decided, you know what? I'm going to start a business and see what happens. My rationale at 22 years of age was, the best time for me to fail is now. I have the least amount of attachment. I can fail many times and pick myself back up and not worry about, oh, I got a mortgage payment or all these expenses that I have in my life. And so I went for it. And there were some rough first couple of years, but eventually you get somewhere. And I want to point out the legendary management business consultant, Peter Drucker, writes this idea that in business, all profit comes from risk. So if you understand this concept, if you're willing to take the risk, and not all of us are, but this has been my big bet, is to take increasing size of risk. The more risk that you take, the more responsibility and accountability you have, the more you'll earn in your life. And for me, the decision to go out on my own and fumble through my way of being an entrepreneur, taking on a 5-year lease to rent a 3,000 square foot studio, one of the scariest things in my life. paying a contractor $100,000 to do the build out, an architect $20,000 when I'm just a few years out of school, led to some of my biggest personal and professional growth and development. That's all I have to say about that. Adam?
Well, that makes me ask, okay, what about someone who's getting close to 50 here? Can I still take a risk without fail? And I guess I'm sure the answer is absolutely. I mean, I know I've heard some quote where it's like the best entrepreneurs are just making the best calculated risk. Like there's risk there, but they're minimizing that risk as much as possible. So whatever your age, whatever your moment in life, whatever you're going after, I think the message is still figure it out, make a plan, and then go for it. Even if you have to like do it on the side and be a side gig, or even if you have to, you want to get a different role at a big, huge company, even for me, like I need to start looking at where can I find growth? Where can I find opportunity? What relationships do I need to build? How do I learn and try something new? That's where there's going to be opportunity. So lots of ways to bet on ourselves. And I hope this has been helpful context for all of you. Thank you for listening. At least this is just, Chris and I, our harebrained ideas of what we would do first and where we would go based off of our experience. But hopefully it's helpful. And now we'll turn it back over to you, Amarita, for any questions or wherever we're going.
Yeah, can I just say that the comments are lit, but just based on the last thing you guys said, I think I don't know if it's our education system or society in general, but it's taught us to minimize risk. It's also the human brain, right? It's like caveman day brain. You're always like, okay, I'm going to go hunt in the morning and not in the evening because it's dark and I can't see or whatever it is. So we're always trying to minimize risk, but I can't remember who said this. I think it was Naval Ravikant, but he's like, as you age, and just coming back to your notion about age, as you age, you might want to force yourself to almost, I think he called it minimize regret. It's like the opposite of minimize risk. It's like you don't want to be on your deathbed, or you don't want to be like 80 and not able to walk or whatever it is, and be like, damn, I wish I'd done that. Damn, I wish I'd like taken that plunge or what have you. So I have like a million stickies on my wall all the time with like little notes to myself. And I always say, like in marketing, like minimize regret. I don't want to finish the year and be like, oh, I wanted to take that moonshot. I even had the budget and I didn't do it.
Well, I think that's some of the stuff that we've been talking about. Like, how do you minimize risk? You bet on yourself. You educate yourself. You make good partnerships. You get a coach. You figure out a strategic vision. You make a system. Like I think all of those things that we've been talking about today are ways to minimize risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I guess just coming back to something that you said earlier. So you started this other, let's call it a side hustle for a moment. You didn't know where it was going to go. You weren't making that much money in the beginning, but you said something told you, despite not having evidence, you continued with it and you continued putting time and effort and energy into it. What was it? Like, if you think back, like what was a leading indicator for you that this could be something? Or was it just like, hey, I'm having fun doing this, so I'm just going to keep doing it?
I don't think, I think in those leading indicator mindset, like I'm not an analyst. I don't review things. I go with my gut most of the times. Luckily for me, most of the times it works out. I do want to point this out. In your life, you're going to have to decide something. If you run a business, if you work within a business, it's the same thing. You want to ask yourself, are we an innovation company, a company that's driven by taking risks, spending money in research and development and trying new ideas? Or are we going to be a really efficient company and squeeze the maximum productivity out? Because they live on the opposite ends of the spectrum. You have to decide. And most people say we're an innovative, pioneering company and we have big, crazy ideas. But in truth, they don't do any of that. So innovation is inherently messy and wasteful. And I knew starting this company could be a complete failure. I could just totally throw all this money into a pit and have it go nowhere. But what it really excited me was I was able to do something which I forgot to mention before, is a super stack marketable skills that are compounding in return. Okay, that's a lot of words to say. But when I was teaching and running an education company, I got to combine my experience as a teacher, my passion for learning and sharing with others, my business experience, having been coached for 13 plus years at that point in time, and the actual experience of running a motion design firm and my background in design and animation. When I'm able to super stack all those skills together as a teacher, I knew inside my heart, even before we had evidence, that it was going to pay off. How could it not?
Yeah, so kind of being self-aware and knowing where your strengths lie, and then trying to triage and figure out like what those hotspots are. I love that. Just to pull that thread a bit more, are you of the mind that in order to fully unlock your potential, it is better to go at it alone?
Ooh.
Because, you two are very opposite in that way, right? Like Adam's big guy at a big company and you're just like total solopreneur and you've taken that path. And I see smart people obviously on all of these areas, but like to really unlock your own personal potential, do you feel like that can be done inside a large company? Or is that, I don't know, is that like a net that's always there to catch you if you fall? I don't know. I'm just riffing based on some of the comments coming through.
This is a question for Adam, right?
I mean, either of you could answer it.
Adam, what do you think?
Well, there are certain, let me say this, like the one thing that I did learn early in my career, especially at ad agency life, there's just ups and downs and layoffs and things change all the time. And it's like, I learned early on that I can't trust anyone with my career except myself. So I know there is some things where it's like, no one's going to save you. No one's going to protect you. And at the end of the day, it's you and your skills and what you're doing. That said, I mean, I don't think that moving forward on my own has been a possibility. Not at all. Like there's so many people I've talked to, so many relationships I've had, so many other things that have built my career independent of me. But I know I can control my skills. I know I can control my knowledge. I can control how well I do at that and trying. And then the other half is going to be, other people coming in. Like there's no way I could climb up a business like Adobe all by myself. No chance in hell. Like it has to be, there has to be a partnership or partnerships along the way.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here. I think there's this concept that the human mind, once stretched, never shrinks back to its original size. And you can do this in lots of different ways. From the times in which I worked within a corporation, a big business, I remember a guy next to me, his name was Greg, and he was a whiz at Photoshop. This is like Photoshop 2.0. And he was doing things with Photoshop that made type look three-dimensional. I'm like, how are you doing that? So in the short time in which I was just sitting next to him, I think all of like a week and a half, I learned most of my Photoshop skills that I still use this day just by being next to someone. So if you're working within a big corporation, there could be an amazing marketing director or strategist, and you're like, wow, that's how you think, that's how you present. And you pick up on the language and the strategies and the frameworks, and you get the opportunity to ask them questions and be a fly on the wall. Super amazing opportunity. As an independent business owner, you have to pay for those opportunities. That's the cost. And you have to hire people, either part-time as consultants, as teachers and advisors. But the main point here is you need to learn things and stretch yourself to go way beyond where you're at today if you want to have that kind of growth. The more you invest in yourself, the greater the return on that investment that you're going to realize for the rest of your life.
Such a good point. What about balancing action, like taking action yourself, but then also delegation? So both of you work with large groups of people. And I'm sure like things are, there's ups and downs. There's sometimes things are hectic. There's, it's like a weird time right now. How do you let go? How do you delegate? What do you delegate? Just talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Adam, you want to go?
Sure, no problem. I guess the reality is my job as a boss of other people, other managers, is to find the gaps and opportunities where they can grow. And a bad manager would go and just say, okay, here are 3 things that I could do to help my career. To hell with whoever is below. Like I'm just going to do those 3 things and climb the chain, which is a horrible plan, but people do it. It's a horrible, horrible way to do it. I think the better plan is to say, okay, I can see you on my team. Here's the gap that you have and the best thing. Here's the project that would help you best to grow. So I'm going to give that to you, and then go searching and, having a mindset that it's, that there's plenty more out there. There's not like a limited mindset of just 1 or 2 projects. And I'll go out and say, okay, how can I affect the big story or the messaging or the something else, and find a home for myself to grow by pushing on that. So that's the way I would operate it, is to definitely give moments and let people struggle and try and grow. And it really is your job as a manager to help with that. And then same token, you still have to grow yourself and then just look for your own opportunities. So I guess I'm lucky, or maybe I just have a mindset about it, but I think like at Adobe, there are always opportunities. There are always more ways to learn and grow. And so finding something for you and for your team is totally doable.
My take on this is there's a progression that most creative people are going to go through. in the very beginning, I think there is something to be said about mastering your craft. So my beginning was, excuse me, in traditional 2D print design. I think I figured that out after a few years of working at it. And then I stepped into this world of motion design, and I spent the next 20 plus years trying to refine and hone my craft. But every time I learned something, I always ask myself, like, am I better serving this company by doing this work myself, or hiring someone who maybe not at that level and training them up and art directing and coaching them up where they get paid what they're worth, and I'm able to capture the difference between what I pay them and what I'm able to charge a client. And so you start to go in this opposite path as a business owner or as a manager, as a leader, is that you have to let go of the work because you're stifling growth underneath you. If you never let go of the work, no one's going to learn. And you're going to be a micromanager. And you're going to be that kind of person who everybody says, well, I'm not going to try because nothing I ever do is good enough, because all they do is say, this is terrible, this sucks, and you suck, right? And that's some kind of control issue that you eventually have to get therapy for. But I find that there's actually very few things that are essentially only things that you can do, that you must do. Everything else you can delegate. So learn it so you understand it. And as soon as you get some level of proficiency, bring someone else in, train them up. Or if it's an area of expertise you don't wish to develop, hire the best person you can afford and pay them a little bit more than you think, because you'll get a better person. And then together, you'll build a much stronger company, because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
I love that. I feel like this was fully directed at me because I totally do those things, and I probably do need therapy. But it's tough, in startup life, you're so used to being under the gun, and you're the person who's always like giving the answers. So you want to keep the work as close to you as possible. So yeah, absolutely. Like you got to let go. And yeah, of course, hire smart people who know a lot more than you. A bunch of people have commented in different ways. And I think what they're trying to get at, and I think Don Kells said it best in the comments. He said that a creative social network is key for bouncing ideas off one another, which reminds me of that phrase, what is it? You're the sum of your 5 friends, or the 5 people you hang out with. How does one go about curating that group? So, I mean, you can't always pick your friends, but you can maybe pick, I don't know, like an acquaintance group or a work posse or whatever it is. How would you curate that if you want to level up, and, not just yourself, but everybody needs to level up? Where do you start?
I'll go first, I guess, Chris. That was something I was going to talk about that I missed earlier when Chris was talking about going out and hiring a coach. I haven't done that. I've done a mentor, but what I have tried to do is the idea of surrounding yourself with your own personal career board of directors. And these are people that aren't necessarily your boss or a coworker. People that I've found have been an author in a totally different field, a business person in a totally different area, and just really cultivating those relationships. And the hard thing is this, like, just reaching out cold to someone and saying, hey, I want you to be my mentor. I've had people do that on LinkedIn. Hey, there was this one woman, she was awesome. It was like, we're going to meet every Thursday, and we're going to do this and this and that, and you're going to be my mentor, and this is how we're going to go over it. I'm like, that is awesome. I'll at least talk with you once because you're so bold. But you got to build up trust first. So doing things for them, helping them out. Like, there have been people, like, there are things you can do to create a relationship before you do the ask. But I've just tried to, like, curate those people that I think will fit in, like someone who can help me with finances, someone who can help me with career development, someone who can help me with, education and growth, someone who can help me with whatever, and really try and cultivate that board of directors for your career. So again, it can be anyone. It could even be books. Like, you think about books and podcasts, like, go to Chris's site, The Future, and buy every course and do it all. And you'll feel like you have a relationship with Chris. Like, you really will. So there are a lot of ways to get those mentors, to get those connections, to get that posse, as you're saying. But the other thing is, and I would say, like, this is what I said earlier, like, find 3 people that you admire. If you just find people who are not pushing themselves, not, wanting to reach for greatness, then, you're going to be the sum of your parts, right? It's the people you surround with. So go big and figure out, what's the company I want to be around? Who are the people that are working there? What are the people online that I'm going to cultivate? Like, even on LinkedIn or whatever, you could still offer and help and share posts. And there's a lot of things you can do to start to cultivate that. But seek for the ones who you're really inspired by and reach out to them. Now, sorry, Chris, you're going to get like 1,000 people reaching out to you after this, but you got to earn it first. You can't just ask and that's it. So that's what I'd say, like seek, go big, but earn it.
Yeah. So if I were to piggyback off that idea, I would say if you're trying to build a relationship with someone that you look up to, give value before you ask. That's a general rule of just courtesy and human to human interaction. So many people just go right to it, like, hey, hire me. I'm like, well, I don't even have a relationship with you. But here's one thing I want to say, because it's kind of like easy to say, like, oh, there's all these great mentors. Let's chase after them. We all should do that. But the first thing I want to do is let's not overlook the people who are already in our circle, our orbit today. And oftentimes what we do is we overlook them because we're looking through this very selective lens and one where we think, well, I'm not going to listen to you because you don't have the same experience. You're not in the same field, or you don't have the kind of awards and accolades and do. But you know what? Some of the best ideas come from my wife or my children or some random person I meet on the street. And believe it or not, some of the best ideas come from some of my haters. They just say, Chris, this is a dumb idea. I start to think, why is this a dumb idea? Why isn't this resonating or connecting with you? That's a valuable piece of feedback for me. So look at through the lens of receiving and learning. And the thing, and if it's very hard to do, if you can sift through the negative stuff and just find the gold nuggets, you can live richly just around the people that are in your orbit today. Now, outside of that, what you need to do is surround yourself with people who really challenge you. Yes, you should look up to them, but they should be doing things that make you feel really uncomfortable. You know, that little vomit in your throat that you feel uneasy about? That's a good sign, like, they have contrarian points of view. They're moving much faster than me. They're thinking much bigger than me. And it forces you to look inward and reflect on your life. I was at a dinner recently where I was the least successful person at the table. This person was the former CEO. That person just exited a company for $250 million. And the ideas that these people were talking about were such a high level that one dinner, I think I pulled an idea from there. That's a $3 million idea. So when you surround yourself with people who challenge you, who make you feel a little bit sick inside, they're probably the ones that are going to lead you to the greatest amount of growth in your life.
Yeah, that's good advice. Really good advice. I'll just speak for myself, but as a bit of an introvert, it's hard for me to go to like dinners like this, conferences. Oh my God, I don't think I've been to a conference in 5 years. But yeah, it's really about finding those opportunities where you can be around those smart people. And Adam, I'll just want to say, like, the little that I know you, you have such a generous spirit. Like, I can see how that reciprocity would be very easy with you. And I think like all of us can learn from that, observe that and learn from that and put that into action, because to both of your points, like when you are trying to, make a connection with somebody, that just becomes a lot easier because you are just that giving person automatically. We have a million more comments and questions coming through, but I think we've run out of time. So we will have to do this in another forum, perhaps the Superside community that's launching today. But yeah, thank you both so much. Any parting thoughts or wisdom that you want to share with the group?
I just want to say one quick thing. I do know Adam, and you're absolutely right in your read on Adam. He is a super generous human being, a good person. I just want to put that out there. I do know him.
I just feel weird. That it's not the vomit thing, but it's just a weird feeling, Chris, in my tummy. But thank you. That's very nice of both of you. No, parting thought is just I think be thoughtful. You really just like set aside. Now that's the holidays. Like this is what I do every year, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take a day during the break, during the holidays, to just sit with a notebook and really start to ask big questions. What do I really believe in? What do I care about? What are the things I really want to do? Just take some time to plan it out for yourself, not just your business or your company or your career, whatever it is, but just for you personally. I think that's so essential.
Absolutely. Holiday checklist, people. You heard it from Adam. Okay, thank you both.
Hey, I hope that session sparked some ideas and provided some excellent insight. If it did, join the Superside community. We've got plenty more videos and events to enjoy. Otherwise, visit superside.com to book a quick demo and find out more about what we do. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.